There's more to this world than one mind can fathom.
Whispers from beyond speak of secrets and power beyond mortal reckoning.
It's all yours for the taking, if you're willing to make a deal.
We're talking about the Warlock in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. Greetings, initiates. My name is Monty Martin.
And I'm Kelly McLaughlin.
And we are the Dungeon Dudes.
Today we're taking a look at the Warlock from Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition.
We're going to cover everything you need to know to create a Warlock in your Dungeons & Dragons campaign. We're going to show you how to create a pact with your patron, pick your spells and eldritch invocations, select a race and choose your ability scores so that your Warlock is prepared to seize the secrets that mortal minds were never meant to know.
And we're going to help get you inspired by looking at famous warlocks from folklore and literature, as well as some role-playing options to really get you going.
With that, let's get rolling.
So why play a warlock?
Well, the Warlock is the quintessential pact magician, an arcane spellcaster who makes an eldritch deal with an otherworldly patron in exchange for magical power and knowledge.
Yeah, and this is a lot different than a lot of the other spellcasters who get their abilities from otherworldly beings. These ones are much more interesting and, to me, very dark and mysterious.
Yeah, indeed. The Warlock gets these great role-playing opportunities baked into the class because the Eldritch patrons aren't like deities. They're not nature. They're demons. They're fey lords. They are undead creatures. They could almost be anything you imagine that isn't this kind of divine force, but something that has a great amount of magical power and is willing to share it, maybe unwillingly or just with the right deal.
Yeah, and that makes for a very interesting class. Also, mechanically, they're one of the most versatile and complex classes to play just because of all the choices you get to make.
The Warlock is so interesting to play because many of their abilities and their unique spellcasting mechanic allows them to gain their abilities back on a short rest or even just use them at will. So they feel very different in play than many of the other arcane spellcasting classes like the Sorcerer or the Wizard. At the same time, with this benefit comes a huge amount of mechanical complexity. So if you love getting into the ins and outs of building your character, if you want to have a big choice to make every level, if you want to see the impact of making choices from one level to the next, the Warlock is a great choice.
I also think warlocks are very interesting because they are a charisma-based class. That means that when it comes to role-playing and social interactions, you get to kind of be the face of the party at times, which I think is very interesting to mix with that dark, brooding magic that you have.
The feeling of making these dark deals, of this negotiation between your patron and your own power, means that you get this great role-playing opportunity with the Dungeon Master to make out the terms of your contract. It's so inspiring as well because there's so much occult lore in Dungeons and Dragons, but also in real world mythologies and religions that you can draw on for getting inspired with your character.
Looking at the Warlock, they're the closest to, in my opinion, Lovecraftian horror that you can get from a class in the D&D world. And to me, that's just like this darkness that I think is very rooted in the world of D&D. And I think if you look in the right places, there is a lot of Lovecraft vibes that you can pull on, and the Warlock is the best person to pull on those.
If your Eldritch patron is going to be Cthulhu or one of the other great entities that H.P. Lovecraft and other writers within the genre were inspired by and writing about, that is such a great opportunity to go with. And if you want to start spouting out Cthulhu-like language, act like a real crazy cultist, wear a crazy mask for your character, of course, maybe not at the table.
Yeah, maybe.
Just get into reading H.P. Lovecraft. Read Reanimator, read The Call of Cthulhu. Go through those books because not only are they fantastically inspiring for Dungeons & Dragons, you're going to get lots of great ideas to inspire you for making a Warlock.
There's a lot of folklore and literature out there that is also really in tune with this. And I think of a lot of stuff to do with witches.
Absolutely.
Witches, in essence, are very much warlocks.
And who is the better example of the witch than the great Baba Yaga of Slavic and Russian folklore? She is such a fantastic and enigmatic character that has reared her head many times in Dungeons & Dragons adventures and other inspiration. And I think looking at the deals that she cuts with other adventurers, Baba Yaga would herself be a fantastic warlock patron.
What I think is really cool here is we don't have a lot of specific examples from film and television, but really there are a lot of movies and TV shows that feature a witch-like character. And I'm thinking of so many scenes that I've seen where like you have the witch who's they're preparing to cast their ritual magic and they're like grabbing that raven and like squeezing the blood out of it and like all of this horrific stuff, and they're like sprinkling this and that into this potion and smoke's rising and then they become possessed and like cast these spells. And like there's the specific scene from Sleepy Hollow where they go to visit the witch.
Oh yeah.
And I just imagine warlocks when they're preparing their spells and things like that, that is in essence what they are doing.
All those old horror stories, any of the mythology around Halloween with witches, these are all great things to get your creative juices flowing when you're thinking about the flavor and the lore of a warlock. But of course, the PACT comes from medieval folklore, and no better example can be found in the tragic tale of Dr. Faustus and the wicked Mephistopheles. You have to read this story or this play if you're gonna play a warlock. There is no better example of why someone swears a pact to a demon or devil and how that results in their downfall than the story of Dr. Faustus. If you can read Marlowe's play, it's fantastic, but there are many different renditions of the tragedy of Dr. Faustus. And Mephistopheles, if you don't already love Mephistopheles from Dungeons & Dragons lore, you will love the character of Mephistopheles once you check out these plays.
Just going to add that to my reading list.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk now about building your warlock, and what a complex class. They're really amazing, but you need to be careful because there are intense decisions that you have to make at every single level, from invocations, spells, abilities, all sorts of things that make it a pretty heavy-duty class to take on.
And what's more, because each of these options often builds on the last, the synergy between your spells, invocations, and other choices that you make as a warlock all work together. And so if you're not planning your warlock out, you might end up with a less than satisfying character.
That makes them, I would say, one of the harder classes for a beginner player to take on.
I would agree, and it's very deceptive because many people feel that due to the Warlock's spellcasting mechanic, it makes them one of the more forgiving classes for a new player. I disagree with this. The Warlock is much closer to its 4th edition roots that it's been built on, and it carries that mechanical weight with it.
So we get a D8 hit die.
For armor, Warlocks are proficient in light armor.
And for weapons, we get all simple weapons.
Warlocks get to choose any 2 from the following skills: Arcana, Deception, History, Intimidation, Investigation, Nature, and Religion.
And for saving throws, you get Wisdom and Charisma.
Now, Warlocks are considered a primary spellcaster, but they use the unique PACT magic system for their spellcasting, which it makes them unlike every other spellcasting class in 5th edition.
They are a charisma-based spellcaster, which means that you're going to be using charisma to determine your spell save DC and your spell attack modifier.
However, unlike every other class in the game, Warlocks have an extraordinarily limited number of spell slots, gaining only 1 spell slot at 1st level, then getting a second one right away at 2nd, and then from there you're going to get your 3rd and 4th spell slots not until your character is over 10th level.
What is cool about the Warlock with their spellcasting, even though you have a limited number of spell slots, they are of the same level and they level up with you. So you get up to 5th level spell slots.
By 9th level.
Yeah.
So all your spell slots, once you're a 9th level character, are 5th level spell slots. And what's more, the icing on the cake is that they come back on a short rest instead of a long rest. This means that your Warlock is a wellspring of magical power, being able to send out those spells in every combat encounter and then take a rest and bring them back. This does mean, though, that a Warlock can feel a little bit restrictive if they have to go through a lot of combat encounters before they get a short rest, or even worse, if you're only having 1 combat encounter in the adventuring day and then taking a long rest.
So we have another great Warlock ability called the Mystic Arcanum. So when you look at it on paper, it may seem like warlocks don't get to cast above 5th level spells, but Mystic Arcanum is what's going to grant you 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th level spells.
Yes, the reason why warlocks have a separate system for these high-level spell slots is because they're not spell slots. They are spells that they get to cast once, and then they need to take a long rest to get that Mystic Arcanum spell back. Warlocks get to choose their first Mystic Arcanum at 11th level as a 6th level spell slot, and then again at 13th for 7th level, 15th for 8th level, and 17th for a 9th level spell.
For me, that's just a great balancing act because they're the only primary spellcaster that can regain their spell slots on a short rest. So giving them these high-level spells being a long rest just makes sense. Based on this, what ability scores are we going to choose?
Primary spellcaster, based on charisma. Charisma is going to be your highest ability.
Yeah, we say this with every spellcaster. Most spellcasters, if it's your spellcasting ability, you want to choose that as probably your primary. What would your next one be?
Probably for my warlock, I would go with a good constitution and dexterity score. Both because you are a spellcaster, you're going to be wearing light armor, probably. There's exceptions. So you want a good dexterity score to keep you safe, and you want a good constitution score, again, to boost up your hit points. You only have a D8 hit die. And as a warlock, concentration spells are going to be the best bang for your buck with your limited number of spell slots. So you will usually be concentrating on a spell in combat, and you want something to boost up that constitution saving throw, going as far as taking the resilient feat to get proficiency. Warcaster, you really want to boost that up. I think strength is definitely the one that you're going to ignore.
That's fair.
And I think that you really are doing something out of the ordinary if you invest in your strength as a warlock under the current rules.
So dexterity is always better. And then we have wisdom and intelligence.
And I think that that's going to be a role-playing decision. I think that it's kind of thematically appropriate for a warlock to have a low wisdom score and a high intelligence score, because I think of that archetype too of someone who's brilliant but makes very poor decisions.
Yeah.
And that seems to me to be the one that with a warlock, like, I think you got to be a little bit crazy, a little bit foolish to sign a pact with a demon or Cthulhu. So probably wisdom's going to be your low score in addition to strength.
So there's a lot of races that are really cool for the warlock. As with most charisma-based classes, what jumps to my mind immediately is tieflings seem very thematic.
And their celestial counterpart, the Aasimar from Volo's Guide to Monsters, both of them get a nice hefty charisma boost, and you both have a patron that you can select to match up, the Fiend and the Celestial now, so you can get a really thematic character out of that.
Also, half-elves are really strong here with their charisma boost and their boost to two other stats.
I think the half-elf is probably the strongest option for any of the charisma-based spellcasting classes, because again, you get that trifecta of the big boost to your charisma score and the boost to the ability scores that you care about, because you get two of those, extra skills, dark vision, the Fey ancestry trait. It's the complete package. Almost any of the cool elf subraces like Eladrin and Drow are great. A Dragonborn would be interesting. There's no Draconic patron yet for the Warlock.
Isn't.
I'm really looking forward to that.
Did Dragonborn, they get a boost to charisma?
Yep, they do.
Nice.
+1.
Yeah.
But, you know...
So not as strong as some of
Yeah.
the other options, but still kind of cool.
Yep.
What about Lightfoot halflings?
I think they'd be a great choice. Again, you get dexterity bonus and a charisma bonus. There's a few other races in Volo's Guides to Monsters that have some cool charisma boosts that I think would make great warlocks. I don't think that they're as standout as perhaps the Tiefling, Aasimar, and Half-Elf, but I think that they're decent options as well. And finally, of course, the human and the variant human to get that feat off the top. I don't think the variant human is as good as a half-elf, but it's still a great warlock.
So why don't we discuss some of the otherworldly patrons that we can choose for our warlock? And this is a fun choice that you get to make at first level.
It's a fun one, but an important one.
Yeah.
Because it's going to define the terms of your agreement. So it's going to be a huge part of how you roleplay your character. And you got to design with your DM what your pact is and who your patron is.
So yeah, when you're making this choice, you have a number of patrons to choose from. From the player's handbook, you have Pact of the ARCHFEY, the Fiend, and the Great Old One.
And Xanathar's Guide to Everything introduced the Pact of the HEXBLADE and the Pact of the Celestial. And we also find the Pact of the Undying in the Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide. you're going to gain a special ability at 1st level, 6th level, 10th level, and 14th level. These get really, really good. Also, every otherworldly patron adds a selection of spells from 1st to 5th level that you can choose from that are exclusive to that patron.
Those spell lists are really good. Like, there's not a single one of them that I'd say looks bad. I read through all of them. Just
You're going to be tempted to take most of your picks from your patron.
yeah.
The thing to bear in mind is that unlike the cleric and the paladin, who also gain an expanded spell list from their choice, with the warlock, you don't automatically know all of these spells. They're added to the warlock spell list for you to choose from when you can choose spells, but you don't automatically get them all. Would be kind of too good if you did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's start off with the Pact of the ARCHFEY, which gives you a really cool spell list. Like, you get things like Fairy Fire, Sleep, Dominate Person.
Greater invisibility, seeming. It's all really about illusion and mind control because the Fae are tricksters. Gotta watch out with these ones because I think that they basically want to tempt you into coming into the Feywild and partying with them for the rest of time. And you're probably going to have all of your essence drained out of you in the process.
Yeah, but who doesn't want to party in the Feywild?
With fairies? Awesome. Yeah. Your patrons here are going to be examples like Baba Yaga or ARCHFEY like Oberon or Titania. These great lords and ladies of the Seelie and Unseelie courts in the Feywild. The unique abilities are pretty interesting for this one. You're going to get abilities that to charm and frighten creatures that also put them also into like a hallucinogenic state, or let you teleport away to escape from harm.
Why don't we look at Pact of the Fiend, which is, swearing an oath to the devil.
This is the classic pact. And again, so you're looking at demon princes and archdevils like Mephistopheles, Asmodeus, Orcus, the Demogorgon, and more. It's a great opportunity to choose your favorite evil lord and make a bad deal.
Yeah, and
for your soul.
I mean, like, you get the spell list that's very fiery. You get Fireball.
You get Wall of Fire, Fireball, Flame Strike, Burning Hands. Lots of good damage dealing stuff, and that carries through the entire theme.
Yeah.
I love the high level ability for this.
Where you drag your enemies through hell. Literally.
Hurl through hell.
Hurl through hell. It's even a great name.
And you also get some cool resilience features with this too, because when you kill somebody, you're going to get some temporary hit points, and you get Dark One's Own Luck, which is that extra D10 that you can add to ability checks or attack rolls. Love everything about the Fiend Pact Warlock. I think the Tiefling Fiend Pact Warlock is quintessential. My personal favorite Warlock.
Now, thematically, I absolutely love this next one, although I do agree that the abilities of the Fiend one are, like, amazing. The Great Old One, being a huge fan of Lovecraft, this just screams Lovecraftian horror to me.
It's so cool.
Yeah.
Getting telepathy right away at 1st level is an insanely awesome ability.
The Warlock that plays at my table is a Pact of the Great Old One Warlock, and the amount of times that telepathy has come into play to really change the situation is just incredible. It's such a useful ability, and you gain it at is it 1st level?
Yes.
Yeah.
And you get some great spells in there too, like Ivard's Black Tentacles, Dissonant Whispers, Dominate Person.
Tasha's Hideous Laughter.
Wonderful choices as well. Again, the spell selection for all the pacts is A+, I think, especially in the player's handbook. The Pact of the Hexblade has been a long-awaited and slightly controversial pact, I think, because it's really not clear who your patron is with this pact.
I always thought it was the Raven Queen.
I did too. I like that it is, but I wish that they had have put more of that in there. I also love the idea of use of a warlock sworn to a magic weapon, but the Hexblade and the Pact of the Blade kind of
Yeah, if you take one, if you take the Pact of the Hexblade and don't take the Pact boon for Blade,
I think you're missing out on a lot.
yeah, that, like, it almost doesn't make sense.
This is all about turning your warlock into a melee combat fighter, particularly. Although you can do ranged combat with this as well. You get medium armor and martial weapon proficiency right off the bat. You get a nifty curse ability, and the ability to use your charisma score in place of your dexterity or strength score when you're making a melee or ranged weapon attack. It's a great package right off the bat. It's probably the most powerful package of the first level features, and it just gets stronger from there as you go off and adding on more invocations on top of it. The spell list is a little bit mediocre.
But I think that's fair because taking this option means that you're focusing less on spellcasting and more on dealing damage in melee or ranged combat.
Which is a fantastic kind of middle ground because you're using those limited spell slots probably for Eldritch Smite.
Going the opposite way of the Pact of the Fiend, let's talk about the Pact of the Celestial.
A very interesting spell list with lots of cleric-inspired spells. And this one actually makes your Warlock into a bit of a healer.
If your party's struggling for a healer and that you don't have anybody else, like this is one option you can go with.
I think this is a cool thematic pact for a player that doesn't necessarily want to embrace the evil side or the dark side that comes with the other pacts, because you do get to swear your pact with an angel or another celestial entity like a unicorn or even maybe a servant of a deity, but then you start to get into cleric territory.
I never even considered a unicorn. I want to be Pact of the Unicorn.
Although a unicorn might be a fae. They are technically celestials in 5th edition, but I could see a unicorn being your fae pact as well. The last one is the Pact of the Undying, which is a great pact to swear if you want to be the thrall of a lich. You get some cool necromantic abilities and some neat spells related to necromancy. This is a cool one as well because it takes the flavor of kind of the gray necromancer in it as well. So with the Pact of the Undying, you kind of get the ability to go both as evil necromancer or kind of usher of the death. At 3rd level, your patron is going to give you an extra pact boon. You have the choice of the Pact of the Blade, the Pact of the Chain, or the Pact of the Tome.
We have the Pact of the Chain, which gives you the Find Familiar spell and lets you have your own little pet minion. There's a lot of really cool options with this one.
With the Pact of the Blade, your patron is going to send you a magical weapon that you are automatically proficient in and that you can summon into your hand. Of course, if you choose the HEXBLADE patron, it's going to greatly expand your options with the Pact of the Blade.
And the Pact of the Tome is for people who want to be a little bit more spell focused.
Because you're going to get to choose additional cantrips from any class list, which is pretty awesome.
So we're going to talk now about one of the coolest things that the Warlock has at their disposal, and that is their Eldritch Invocations. You get to choose these starting at 2nd level, and you roughly get one of every 3 levels or so.
You get 8 total over the course of your character's career. Many Eldritch Invocations have additional prerequisites, usually requiring you to either have a specific patron or a specific pact, but there's many that have no prerequisites at all whatsoever, except for your overall Warlock level.
This is, to me, one of the coolest options that you get because you really get to fine-tune how you're going to execute the spells that you've chosen. There's a lot to kind of help guide you, but you need to be careful with these choices to make sure that there's a lot of options to complement each other, which is, I think, what we're going to talk about.
Yeah. I think one of the first things to mention with the Eldritch Invocations is that there are so many of them, and there are so many great combinations of Eldritch Invocations that we do not have the time to cover them all. So if you think we've missed something, please let us know about it in the comments. Tell us how it works. Tell us what you think about it. Give us your favorite suggestions because we're definitely going to miss them. We haven't gotten into the details of Eldritch Blast yet, which is the iconic Warlock cantrip.
I'd say the only reason that people don't take Eldritch Blast is because
They're going back to the Blade.
Yeah, or they hear that everybody else went Eldritch Blast because like 95% of people that play a Warlock are gonna take Eldritch Blast.
And it's amazing for dealing damage. The reason why this is because of Agonizing Blast, which adds your Charisma modifier to the damage roll of each beam that your Eldritch Blast fires. Since Warlocks are eventually going to be firing 4 beams with their Eldritch Blast, if you max out your Charisma, that's an extra 20 points of damage, which is not nothing. On top of this, you can add other invocations like Repelling Blast, which will push the target back 10 feet.
Isn't there also one that was introduced in Xanathar's that pulls them towards you?
Or decreases their speed as well. I love these options, and I could see someone just choosing every single invocation that messes with your Eldritch Blast and having a great character.
There's also some invocations that give you some really cool spells as well.
Yeah, these can be tricky to choose because it's not clear if getting a new spell is worth an invocation.
But being able to take Polymorph with Sculptor of Flesh
is really good.
Yeah.
The other one that's fantastic is Sign of Ill Omen for Bestow Curse and Minion of Chaos for Conjure Elemental. All three of these are fantastic spells for a Warlock. The other ones, it's iffy. If you love the spell, take it. I think the one that I would say is really good for this is Armor of Shadows, because it gives you mage armor at will.
Yeah, which is awesome. That just ups your AC. That helps out a lot. You also have Mask of Many Faces, which allows you to cast Disguise Self at will, which is great for role-playing options and like stealthy warlocks.
There's even a high-level invocation that grants you invisibility at will. Amazing.
Yeah.
Right? All worthy options. If you are a Pact of the Blade Warlock, you've chosen the Hexblade as your patron, you want to make that melee damage dealer, the 4 invocations that you want to keep your eye on are Thirsting Blade, which is going to grant you extra attack, Life Drinker, which is going to add your charisma modifier to your damage rolls of your attacks made with your Pact weapon, Eldritch Smite, which will grant you the ability to use your spell slots to make a paladin-like smite that also knocks the target prone.
That's awesome.
And finally, Improved Pack Weapon, if you want to have a +1 weapon baked in. Improved Pack Weapon, you can take it or leave it.
Another really cool option is Devil's Sight. And if you combine that with the Darkness spell, it's insane. Devil's Sight allows you to see in magical darkness, which not many people can, meaning that the Darkness spell, you're one of the only people. So you can cast Darkness, run in.
This is a huge thing that people forget. People forget that you can't see in your own Darkness spell unless you are a devil or have the Devil's Sight invocation, which grants you the ability to see in magical darkness. Casting Darkness on yourself with Devil's Sight means that targets can't see you, which means that you always have advantage on attacks against them. It's about as good as having improved invisibility. If you're a Pact of the Tome Warlock, you absolutely have to take Book of Ancient Secrets so that you get the ritual casting capability. Warlocks are not ritual casters by default, but having this Eldritch Invocation means that you can learn any ritual spell in the game. And you don't miss out if you have the Pact of the Chain either, because you have Voice of the Chain Master, which lets you see and telepathically communicate with your familiar. And at higher levels, you get the amazing Chains of Carceri, which lets you cast Hold Monster at will, as long as you're targeting a fiend or elemental creature.
Like we said earlier, we're not going to be able to name them all. Some of them are absolutely incredible, and really when you're designing your warlock, take a look at the whole list. They're available in both the Player's Handbook, and they added more in Xanathar's Guide to Everything.
I would make a hit list of the ones that you really like, because remember, you only get 8 of them total, so you do have to make some hard decisions, and it is worthwhile going over all of them, making a list of the ones that you think are really, really good, and then making your decisions based on that.
Let's talk about the spells that the Warlock has at their disposal. And we're going to start with cantrips, which we've discussed.
We're going to start and stop with Eldritch Blast.
Yeah, there's other cantrips to choose, but why would you?
And Eldritch Blast is so good because it's force damage, which is the least resisted damage type in the game. It combines really well with the main Warlock damage dealing spell, which is Hex. So the combination here is when your Warlock has Hex, Eldritch Blast, and Agonizing Blast, each beam of your Eldritch Blast does 1d10 damage, plus an extra 1d6 from Hex, and an extra points equal to your Charisma modifier. When you're not using Hex, for instance, combining it with a Fiend Pack Warlock that knows Wall of Fire and knocking enemies into your Wall of Fire, or knocking them off cliffs, or knocking them into the area of Hunger of Hadar. You can get a lot more damage out of casting Hunger of Hadar, concentrating on it, firing enemies back into the area of it using Repelling Blast than you will out of a single fireball.
He's blowing my mind. I didn't think of these things.
I think it's worthwhile noting that the Warlock also gets Synaptic Static.
I love Synaptic Static.
Phenomenal spell from Xanathar's Guide to Everything. It's a great pick once your Warlock gets to higher levels. Hunger of Hadar obviously is a great battlefield control plus damage dealing spell.
Also, thematically, if you read the description of that spell, it just is so cool and so Lovecraftian evil. Like with the slurping noises, dragging your enemies into a vortex, into an alternate dimension of space. It's great. We also mentioned before, Hex is probably a must-take.
Hex is also really cool because you get to impose disadvantage on ability checks to one ability score of your choice. I'll just make a special note here. There were a few comments in one of our prior videos that people thought that this was a disadvantage on saving throws. It is not. Hex is disadvantage on ability checks, not saving throws. That would be stupid good if it was the case, but it's not. Hellish Rebuke is a great spell. Tieflings know it and love it. You get to cast it as a reaction when you take damage.
If anybody out there is a fan of Ghost Rider, Ghost Rider has that ability where he looks into your eyes and makes you feel the torment of all of your sins. That's what I picture Hellish Rebuke being, is you just like stare at them and they feel the hellish fires burn within them. It's cool.
Thunderstep from Xanathar's Guide to Everything, combining that damage dealing with the tactical teleportation, is a phenomenal package for a Warlock who has a very limited number of spell slots and spells known. So being able to get a spell that's both going to let you throw out damage as an AoE and escape is super, super useful.
It's been used at our table a lot, and it's always the get the heck out of their spell, but also damaging the enemies.
It's a way better choice than, say, Dimension Door, I think, for a Warlock, although Dimension Door's range is nothing to shake your finger at.
So let's talk about some of the battlefield control spells. I have some favorites in here.
Yeah, what do you like?
Banishment.
Great pick.
Banishment, where you basically get to point at an enemy, and if they fail their save,
remove them.
They're gone.
When you level up and you get to pick 2 by upcasting it, it's a really good choice. But Hypnotic Pattern, I've mentioned this before, it's a ridiculously good battlefield control spell, probably one of the best in the game, and Warlocks do get access to it, so pick it if you can take it. So if we look at utility spells, Warlocks have a great package here. They got Dispel Magic, they got Dimension Door, they have Invisibility. If you want a social utility spell, you can take Suggestion. You also have access to Counterspell.
Now, you want to be careful with Counterspell because the Warlocks, like we've mentioned earlier, have a limited number of spell slots. Somebody who has more spell slots is more likely to make use out of burning those slots to cast Counterspell.
Counterspell can save your party, so I probably think you still want to eventually pick it up, but I would keep it as a last-ditch effort. Or, if you know that you're going to be able to take short rests, you can be the good counterspeller because you know that you're going to get your spell slots back. But it's a little bit of a catch-22, I think, with counterspell in the Warlock.
Yeah. You also have some really cool summoning spells.
Don't forget Summon Greater Demon from Xanathar's Guide to Everything.
Which is fun.
And Dance Macabre. Even though you don't get to cast Animate Dead as a Warlock, being able to have some undead minions, I think, is thematically appropriate.
Yeah.
Let's get on to Mystic Arcanum. These are the high-level spells that Warlocks will be able to cast. You get 1 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th level spells. This is a very restrictive spell list, but fortunately, Warlocks get some awesome choices. My favorite picks for these are going to be Mental Prison from Xanathar's Guide to Everything, Force Cage, Power Word Stun, and Psychic Scream. All of these are incredible battlefield control spells that will end high-level combat.
I also want to mention Eye Bite, Finger of Death, Maddening Darkness, and Foresight as another really powerful list of spells that you can take for your Mystic Arcanum.
Yeah, this is a great combination, and Finger of Death is such a fun spell.
I've been killed by it before.
Oh.
So let's talk about role-playing your Warlock. There's a lot of really cool questions to take into consideration when you're thinking about this. Things like, why are you choosing the patron? Why are you choosing your
Did
pact
they choose
group?
you?
Did they choose you?
Yeah.
What's your relationship with them? Hey, you're my little minion and we're buds. Or is it more of a darker, like you've given up something to gain this power? It's a lot of interesting questions.
One of the things that you have to wrestle with as a Warlock and that you get to work on with your DM is, what is your character's agenda and what is your patron's agenda? What does your patron want from you? Do you have to report to them? Do you talk to them every night? Do you whisper prayers and devotions to them? Do they demand your devotion and worship because they're trying to become a god? Or Does your patron just not care about you and maybe not even realize? I can see if you're a Great Old One patron and you are a patron of a Great Old One like Cthulhu, they may not even know you exist.
I can imagine a warlock who's created this pact and is like gaining these powers in an attempt to please the entity that they've made this pact with, in an attempt to get them to notice them.
Your warlock wasn't born with magical powers like a sorcerer. They don't get it from a god from their devotion. They didn't learn it like a wizard. They basically stole it. You gotta be a little bit desperate to make this kind of deal.
Yeah. When I think of warlocks, the way in which they cast spells is very different from any of the other classes.
Yeah.
A lot of the classes I see is like the energy within them coming out, whereas warlocks, I mentioned before with looking at witches and Wiccan culture and all of that, I like to role play the idea of having like all of these ingredients, all of these things. You're arranging sticks and rocks in a certain pattern. You're doing these weird things, cutting your hand and draining blood to cast your spells. It's very much more like blood and natural magic, which is kind of more messed up. But I see that as a really cool thing to look at for role playing is how are your spells cast? Because it might not just be an internal energy.
Your warlock's gotta be creepy, right? I imagine that your warlock probably keeps all these weird knickknacks with them as well. One of the other cool things about that notion of your warlock being desperate is it plays into your character's motivation. What was your warlock so desperate for that they swore power to an eldritch, possibly evil, and definitely insane entity? What does it take to make someone do that?
Search for power, search for knowledge.
I think you gotta want more than just power.
Well, true.
I think that, like, for a warlock, it's not about power, it's about power now.
I know that one thing that the player at my table and me had talked about was this search for knowledge more so than other people had, like the secrets, ancient secrets, ancient lore that would allow them to unlock things that other people did not have access to.
Yeah, and I think for that as well, as a DM, when you have a warlock in your party, you have a responsibility to roleplay that patron. And I don't think that the DM should always be doing this because the warlock is not like a cleric or a paladin that has a god whose rules they have to uphold, necessarily. The warlock is given this power, they've made a deal, and that patron might not necessarily be able to take that power away now, but the patron might be saying, hey, I'm going to cut you another deal here.
As a charisma-based class, and yeah, they are kind of dark and brooding and scary, so having them be this like social center point is kind of strange. But you also have to remember that intimidation is part of charisma. And I see that no matter what room they're in, a warlock kind of draws the attention. You're just like, there's this creepy person in the room and I'm uncomfortable.
But the warlock is very seductive because power and knowledge bring that seductive capability. And maybe your warlock is out there to make deals with other people too. Maybe they're going to tempt people on behalf of their patron. There's so many great role-playing opportunities with cutting these deals, exploring that forbidden knowledge and lore, and really messing with the secrets that no one was ever supposed to find out.
So this has been our guide to the Warlock in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, and we hope that you fetch a high price for your soul.
And of course, the Warlock was such a complex class, so many combinations of invocations and spells. There was definitely something we missed in this episode, and we'd love to hear your favorite combinations in the comments below.
Of course, the Warlock is a primary spellcaster, so if you want to check out our video on spells and spellcasting, you can find that right up over here.
And if you're not quite ready to cut a deal, you can check out our other class guides right up over here.
Please subscribe to our channel so that you never miss an episode.
Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time
in the dungeon.